Those Were the Days is filmed before a live internet audience.
Welcome back to Those Were the Days, the show where we hit the rewind button on the VCR, get to ask your parents, go back a spell, and see if that TV show we watched on the VHS tape didn't really go ask your parents. It's just as good as we remember, along with all of those lovely nostalgic commercials. I'm your host this time around, Audie, and tonight we're on a brand new topic of shows to talk about. We're talking about Fox Kids Blockbuster TV. Now, I'll give you a little history on that in just a minute, but first, I need to introduce the rest of our dynamic foursome of hosts to tackle this case. First, we have the commissioner's daughter, Amy.
All right, so we've got Mr. Freeze, and he needs an arch nemesis. Boyle. Let's call him Boyle.
Next, we have the former TVsTravis.
Thank you for calling Goons R Us, a division of Goonco Incorporated. If you're a returning goon, I am legally obligated to remind you the contact with the parole officer with whatever story you need to tell them to stay out of jail. Gonna get your new ID number. Thank you, Bob. So it looks like you're a returning customer. That's great. That's great. What city were you looking to get assigned to this time? Gotham. Really? By choice? Sure. Okay, pal. Whatever you say. Look, I don't have a whole lot right now. Riddler and Penguin are both currently in Arkham. Joker's kind of AWOL, and the clock came a couple hours late. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I do have an opening. How are you?
And last but not least, our Dr.
Nora!
Okay. So, in case the clues weren't enough for you to solve the case, we're talking about Batman, the animated series. But before we get into the show, real quick, let's do just a little intro about the Fox Kids Blockbuster. So, Fox Kids was an American children's programming block. A lot of those things are made by Fox Television. It started around September of 1990, where Audie was busy at the time. And it ran as Fox Kids until 2002. It started actually with a 30-minute programming Monday through Friday, 3 hours on Saturday. But you eventually had 3 hours Monday through Friday, 4 hours on Saturday. There's a bunch of internal politics with Fox, including about the time for kids programming. So in 2001, they gave up the weekday programming and only had the 4-hour Saturday block until 2002, and that went actually to 4Kids Entertainment, who are the producers of the English dub of Pokemon and kinds of other stuff.
Okay.
So that's Fox Kids in a nutshell. Um, so tonight we're actually talking about Batman the animated series, the animated superhero series based on the DC comic character Batman. In case you didn't know, it was developed by Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski, produced by Warner Brothers Animation, and aired on Fox Kids from September '92 until September 1995, with a total of 85 episodes. For the original Batman the Animated Series, there were spin offs and redos and much else afterwards, but the original series was just 85 episodes. And the series was highly influenced by Tim Burton's Batman and Batman Returns movies and the Superman cartoons by Fleischer Studios in the 1940s. So the Batman movies, Batman and Batman Returns, happened in 89 and 92, and then this came out in the animated series came out in 92. So much tied to those movies that they actually asked Danny Elfman to do the music for the cartoon series. He passed at first. So one of his longtime collaborators, Shirley Walker, is credited with getting things started. So she's the one that wrote the theme that we all know
to that awesome intro and so many things.
So good.
Danny Elfman did eventually come back and do some stuff. I think he did it for the more revamped series and their theme music and stuff. So he was involved later on. Writer Paul Dini is one of the ones who also helped shape the show in so many ways, came up with so many things, came up with many of the characters and shaping the character stories that changed from the comics to just make them into what was just the perfect way to do them in this animated show, and just without being too crazy. He grounded so many people and so many villains in the show. Um, and then also one other person to let you know about behind the scenes is the voice director, Andrea Romano. If you do not know about her, she has a storied career in casting for animated programs, especially for Warner Brothers. But she is the one that put together every voice actor in this series and the series beyond. So she is responsible for bringing in the voice talent for all of this. Um, and so let me talk about that for a second. She had a really cool quote that said, when you're doing voiceover casting, there are two different types of casting. One is when you're talking about people who can do character voices, and then there are people who have voices with character. They wanted the latter. They got it.
Oh, I like that.
So, a few voices I want to talk about first before diving into the episode. First and foremost, Kevin Conroy is the voice of Bruce Wayne and Batman. This show was his first voice acting gig ever. He was an accomplished Broadway and off Broadway actor, had done TV and some film, but had never done voice work before. And it was
That's
just kind
insane.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, hold on. That's insane to
Yeah,
think
and-
that this is the first voice acting role he had.
and he talked about it in interviews that like this kind of thing probably wouldn't happen today, but it was like, you know, a friend of a friend who knew Andrea, a producer here, talked him up or whatever. They had gone through hundreds of different actors. I don't know if they had like actual auditions for every single one of them, but everybody that I watched interviews about, Andrea Romano, Kevin Conroy himself, said they had looked at hundreds of actors and just could not find the perfect one. He came in, figured out the voice, and just owned it the first time around. Like as soon as he started talking and doing it, everybody looked at each other and was like, we've got it. This is it. And he talks about specifically for him personally, Kevin Conroy, that is, the aha moment for him was when it was explained that Bruce Wayne was the mask and Batman was the actual person of the character. And that's what really did it for him. But he had such a great way of having this kind of light, tender Bruce Wayne, but then this also deep, and you know, they said they wanted something sexy for Batman. And he just brought it. Okay. Other voice actor that is in this episode, but is not the character he's known for. Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
He is in this episode that we'll talk about as Mr. Boyle. He actually did this recording first, and then they had already cast and recorded some of Tim Curry as the voice of the Joker.
Oh, wow, that would have been a different take for sure.
Yeah.
The
Could you
problem
imagine
was-
that coming out of the Joker?
There's video on YouTube and stuff. You can go find it and listen to it because they had recorded it. They had animated it. So their concern was one of the producers did not like Tim Curry at all. I never got the name, but somebody was like, no, get rid of him. So they were in power enough. They got rid of Tim Curry. And so they're scrambling to figure it out. They had worked with Mark Hamill on this episode. And Andrea Romano, again, was like, why don't we try Mark? And again, talk about somebody who came into the booth and absolutely owned it on the first take.
I do like him telling the story of driving around LA trying to find the Joker laugh.
Yeah.
Because he said he must have just looked like a completely insane person just driving around in his car laughing
it's
to
LA.
himself
That's
maniacally.
perfectly. That
Well,
is.
I'm
you
pretty
know,
sure that's what he
every
said too.
three
It's like,
people.
that's LA.
Yeah.
But, and like I remember Paul Dini specifically saying, as soon as he heard the laugh, we knew it was in. And Mark Hamill, you know, famously talks about casting and everything. And one of the things he thought that just blew him away, knocked his socks off, was the perfect note for doing the Joker. He came in, there was a note: "Don't think Nicholson,"
Oh yeah.
Mm.
as in Jack Nicholson from the Batman movie. So,
Yep.
but yeah, he came in and just owned it. One more I want to talk about that's not in this episode, but is just a cornerstone of what this series achieved and became, is the voice of Joker's hench woman. Is
Mr. J.
Yeah, Arlene Sorkin was the voice of Harley Quinn, and they
Mhm.
created her, like Paul Dini wrote Harley Quinn, created Harley Quinn based on his friendship with Arlene Sorkin, knew her as an actress, comic, whatever, and was like, I want to make a character for her to play. Let me do this. And she was so popular, Harley Quinn, the character, that every director wanted to do an episode with her.
Wow.
And obviously, she is blown up to grand proportions in the DC universe now.
So, back in the day, um, at a nerdtacular, in fact,
Ooh.
um, I cosplayed as Housewife Harley Quinn. It's one of the few like actual character cosplays I have done. I had a wedding cake. It was very good. And then friend of mine does a dead on Mark Hamill Joker voice. And so he would just like yell at me from across the hall. And so it was,
Mr. J, I put the dynamite in the refrigerator. You know, it stays fresher if you put it in the crisper drawer.
That's so good.
Real
Yes.
good.
That's so good.
And like Harley, so many things that were developed and made canon in the cartoon series eventually made their way into the comics. They just did such a good job of, making villains the most basic of what they need to be. Um, but yeah, Harley Quinn came from this cartoon and is exploded to the character she is now. They brought her into the comics to be canon after the fact. She's got the movies, the animated show, incredible from coming from this cartoon. Um, Now you can go to IMDb or Wikipedia and see the rest of all the incredible actors they had in just this series alone.
So many. So many.
Yeah. Anybody have a favorite?
The
I mean,
Scarecrow, hands down. I loved him
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
so much because I was really into creepy stuff at the time. And the whole idea of a character that fights with fear, just, other than Batman, just fascinated me so much. Loved it.
Right. He
Yeah.
was voiced by Henry Pollock II.
Yep. And then there was a second. So there was another version of the Scarecrow that was voiced by Jeffrey Combs
Yes.
um,
Mm-hmm.
later on.
Yeah.
That was in a second iteration of the series. But that original Scarecrow, I loved him. I mean, look, this is the Batman for me. Is Kevin Conroy's Batman? This is the
Yeah.
Joker for me. Is Mark Hamill's Joker? But even like Richard Mall playing Harvey Dent, Two
Yeah.
Face,
Oh,
was
man.
so good because he did the same thing where he had his Harvey Dent voice and his Two Face voice.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard Mall's got that great gravel to his voice, but like John Vernon doing Rupert Thorne. John Vernon's voice is one of
Yeah.
those that's just that deep baritone. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
so many of those. Paul Williams is the Penguin. I
That's
mean,
one of my favorites. Because
it
just you think Paul Williams and you're like, wait, he writes and sings Muppet songs. What is he doing as a penguin? But he's
yeah,
so good.
he was great. Bob Hastings, Commissioner Gordon was
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. Um, John Glover did the Riddler, who was only in a few episodes of this, but he was such a different version of the Riddler. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't the Frank Gorshin, Jim Carrey over the top crazy Riddler. He was very like subdued,
Yeah.
and John Glover was perfect to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just, I mean, everything Andrea Romano did to cast for this was spot on. Like
Yeah.
every single casting was great.
Absolutely. Um, Amy, did you have any favorites you wanted to mention?
This was my first episode of watching Batman the Animated Series.
Sorry, I didn't do
I've
that
seen
part of the
I've
show.
seen clips, obs. Uh,
And,
I notoriously am not a huge fan of Cape and Cowl. I mean, obviously, Adam West has a whole other, and that is a
Oh
thing that
yeah.
I grew to appreciate in my
Mhm.
30s.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I have traditionally not particularly cared for superheroes, so this one fully passed me by.
it's so funny,
That's
Audie.
fair.
You must have assumed we all
Yeah,
knew
he
the
just
goat.
I
assumed.
kind of did, yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'm
Sorry.
like, I'm familiar with the material.
And I'll back you
And that's
up.
the other thing.
I've only ever watched probably a handful of Batman the Animated Series episodes, but I played the video game a bunch
Hmm.
because it
Mhm.
was
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
great on the Super
Yeah.
Nintendo. But like other than that, I'm kind of with you. I probably could count on maybe some of my other hand. Well, at least
Yeah,
one whole hand
Mhm.
and maybe a couple others. How many episodes I've seen?
yeah.
Yeah, no, this was appointment viewing for me.
Mhm.
Batman the Animated Series, because I grew up with first Adam West Batman,
Right.
and then the Tim Burton movies, and it
Mhm.
dovetailed right into this, and this was just right in my wheelhouse. It was the perfect time for me to watch it, and I watched all of it. I couldn't get enough. I watched the new Batman adventures when they did
Mhm.
those, like all of it, Batman Beyond.
Yeah.
This was my jam. And basically when I think of Batman, it's the animated series and then kind of the rest of the iterations of Batman.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll just lump together like a
Mhm.
cornucopia of Batman.
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, the 66 series definitely separates itself because it leaned into the camp so much.
Mhm.
And so it's a second, but it's a close second. But there was just this series had the perfect mix of dark but also humorous, and the music was great. And one of the things, and I made a note of this, is number one, this is a show I never skip the intro to. I love the opening
Mhm.
animation, and I love the music, but it also cartoons of the 80s came in two flavors when with your openings. You either had an opening that had a real kick-ass song and it would show clips and bits from episodes,
Hmm.
or you had one that had great song and this amazingly animated opening sequence, and
Yes.
then the
Mhm.
show would
Yeah.
never look as good. Right?
Right.
Thundercats is the one that I think of first with that. Like the
Yeah.
Thundercats
Yeah.
Mhm.
opening,
Awesome.
man, that Thundercats opening is amazing, and then the show is a lot of people just standing around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Rankin and
Animating's
Bass could
hard.
only do so much.
right.
For me, like
And
this, I love shows like I like cartoons, but this hit when I was like 7 to 10, and I was
mhm,
very much the Looney Tunes. We might have talked about this before, like the Chuck Jones level cartoon. Animaniacs was more my
sure.
speed. This
Sure.
was
Mhm,
more mature. This was like X-Men.
Yeah.
Now I appreciate it a lot, but I think back
Mhm.
then what I was after wasn't what this was presenting. This was for older
Right.
kids, 11, 12,
yeah.
13.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which
I
is
was
which is right where I
Mhm.
was.
Yeah, it makes
I was
sense.
right in
I was
that.
not quite there yet. I still wanted to see people get hit in the head with hammers.
Right.
Uh,
And it was something that this animated series kind of revolutionized, bringing that maturity level to a kids cartoon
Yeah.
the way it did. Um, so yeah, one more voice I want to mention because they are actually in the episode we're talking about, and that's Michael Ansara as the voice of Mr. Freeze. Um, he was a pretty well-known TV actor, did a bunch of different characters all over the place. Um, and actually has a very interesting claim to fame. He is specifically one of 7 actors to play the same character in 3 Star Trek series. In the original series, in Deep Space Nine, and in Voyager, he was Klingon Commander Kang.
Mm,
Oh.
Yeah.
nice.
That's cool.
So, among many other TV things. But he was the one that brought the emotion and passion they wanted for the character of Mr. Freeze. And I read an interview that he gave talking about he even fought with. So Bruce Timm directed this episode. I think this was the first one he actually directed himself. Uh, Ansar and Tim actually kind of butted heads about how to do the character.
Mhm,
And Bruce Timm just wanted it to be just straight robotic. And Ansar was like, no, there has to be some passion behind his loss. We can't just do straight robot. And he won that battle and really brought it with this character and really brought it in this episode. And he continued to voice the character throughout the rest of the Batman animated series, kind of the DC animated universe stuff. So he did it in this in the spinoff. He voiced the character when it appeared in Batman Beyond.
Yep.
And there's an awesome, incredible animated movie called Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub Zero. Terrible title, great movie. Um,
Huh.
Based on this series, like it's this character in this series, um, and kind of a continuation of his character and what happens. But the episode we're talking about tonight is episode 14 of season one, unless you're watching on Max and it's episode 4 for some reason. But this is the episode called Heart of Ice, and it is one of the most acclaimed episodes of the series, considered by many to be the very best, and it won the Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Writing in an Animated Program.
Yeah.
And one of the most interesting things they did with this episode, with this series, with this character, Mr. Freeze, is they just kind of retconned him entirely. Because before this, he was kind of your standard crazy villain with a shtick, and his shtick
Yeah.
was ice and cold, and that was kind of it. I distinctly remember the Adam West series and the episode where he's like has a glow thing, like certain light thing
Yep.
lighting up what it's warm and what's cold, and
Yep.
keeping people where they could be or not be depending on whether they could handle the cold or not, and just messing with people that way. Um, but yeah, Mr. Freeze in this episode, heck of a thing. And this particular character was designed by comic artist Mike Mignola.
Oh, dang.
They
I didn't
tapped
know
him to
that.
do the design. So
Which I did not know until today.
yeah,
I
Wow.
had no idea that Mignola did the design of him, and that's awesome.
And that's
Yeah.
the artist behind, for those who don't
Hellboy.
know, Hellboy
Yeah.
and the BPRD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing Screw On Head, which is the best thing he's ever done.
Yes. He's
I'm
done all
so
kinds of
sad that
amazing work.
comic didn't. I mean, that cartoon didn't. I wish they made it
I mean-
today. Now this is the environment in which that could thrive,
Right.
not just
Oh,
like
absolutely.
like what was it, 6 episodes on Sci-Fi or something like that, 4 episodes
Mhm.
on Sci-Fi. Like now is the time. Bring it back.
So
Yeah.
many
Amazing Screw On
things.
Head.
So many things were just born a little too early, you know?
Yeah. So good.
Yes. Too early. Should have been born now. But so we open up with that opening sequence. Um, just incredible. I told you guys before we were recording, I've got this book called Batman Animated. If anybody wants a really awesome art book or just informative book about something that started this one, Batman Animated, it's actually written by Paul Dini, and Chip Kidd is incredible. And it's got like the entire storyboards for that opening sequence. Um, I got it after a storyboarding class in college, and it's just like, it's got that whole thing. And then again, written by Paul Dini, directed by Bruce Timm, and we open with Mr. Freeze remembering apparently his love. And the thing I most appreciate about this entire cartoon is every one of those super cheesy lines he utters. Michael Ansara manages to pull them off in a not cheesy way.
Yeah, they're serious as a
Yeah.
heart attack.
When he says revenge is a
It's
dish best served cold,
cold.
your heart turns to ice because you know he just froze it solid.
Also, it is kind of interesting that he played Klingon Commander Kang, and that line is always attributed to Klingons
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
about revenge. I kind
I'm
of like
pretty
that.
sure that was intentional on Paul Dini's part.
He definitely pulled it off better than Schwarzenegger did.
Um,
Because, like, you watch, it's funny
yeah.
because I was watching this and I was catching up on the cold puns. And I'm like, oh, cold puns. Why am I not
Mhm.
offended by these cold puns like I am when I watch Batman and Robin? Like,
Right.
Batman and Robin, it
because
feels like
you
it just.
choose Arnold Schwarzenegger for that very specific reason.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
you know it's
Mhm.
not going to be like
Yeah.
smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like one of them treats them like actual sinister things to say, and the other is treating
Ice
them
to
as
meet
puns.
you.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. What killed the dinosaurs?
Lord.
The Ice Age. I was like, oh
It-
gosh.
I mean, it's the Michael Caine in a Muppet movie idea,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Ansar, he came and he understood the assignment of what he needed to do,
Mhm.
and I get like I get Bruce Timm being like, no, it needs to be more robotic. He's cold, he's unfeeling, and all of this,
Right.
and they managed to find the balance in there.
Yes.
In their back and forth, they found the balance of the right amount of emotion in there, and then on top of that, throwing the voice modulation that they did on there
Hmm.
just sounds so otherworldly. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
really love that aspect of it, and the fact that it's not just his suit that does it, that you actually get a little. It amplified it,
Hmm.
but
Mm.
at the end when he's out of his suit, you'd still hear a little bit of that modulation to his
Yeah.
voice.
Hmm. So after his little speech, we get a news report about it being uh, hottest August in Gotham, but still there's a crime spree of cold going on, and we see a Gothcorp place with snow and ice all over it. Um, and we are introduced to Gothcorp CEO Ferris Boyle in this episode, voiced by Mark Hamill. Um, just talking about how this is terrible, and I hope they find whoever does it. Um, and I one thing I loved about this particular part of the show too was you've got the reporter Summer Gleason. She's a regular reporter in this universe. You'll see her here and there reporting, and you see kids throwing snowballs and hit
Hmm.
one of the cops in the background.
That tickled
So
me.
good.
I like
It
And it's
that
was
a
just
really
lot.
like
good.
little stuff like that just makes this that much more special. That like it could have just been her reporting and that was it, but they threw that extra little nugget in there. Um, then we skip to the Batcave where Batman is already on the case and analyzing things. And then we get Alfred, who in this particular episode is all about the funny.
Hmm.
I love Alfred so
And I
much.
loved it. Yeah. He was a great character and always just brought that sense of humor, but just walks in to Batman's on the computer analyzing everything, and he just walks in taking up video games, are we, sir?
We see Batman, right? As
Mm-hmm.
people, we see Batman. Alfred has been taking care of this kid since he was like 11.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
it's like when your kids do something that's like impressive, but also at the same time you're like, I know what you do with your boogers. Like
Yeah, pretty much.
that's who
Exactly.
Alfred is. It just tickles me. I love their
Yep.
relationship.
It's great. But Batman's just like, oh, yeah, here's what I'm doing. Bloop, blop, bloop. Puts everything together. Everything that's been stolen so far could actually be put together as some kind of weapon. But
And see, here's my thing. This was the point at which I said, if there was a corporation that was making parts that you could just like slap like four of them together and they become a mega weapon, the government would already know about it and they would have already purchased all of this. We would not. This is not secret.
In
Mhm.
our world, yes, but not in the world of Gotham
No,
City.
no.
Right. So puts it together and it's like there's one last component they need. It's at a certain place. And then we get cut to the scene where, of course, Mr. Freeze and his goons are breaking into that place, and Batman's like right behind him, like just right behind him with the Batmobile. Which
In the greatest Batmobile
I was
ever.
about to say, one of the most incredible
It's
design
really
Batmobiles.
good. So
Yeah,
good.
it basically took the Burton movie Batmobile and just turned it into a jet and
Yeah.
like an actual jet and just made it sleek and just amazing. And I love how Mr. Freeze uses his ice ray to slow him down, and we actually get the whole let's shoot a you know wire thing out and use that to try and turn us like they did in the movie, like you know taking some of those cues and using them for the series. Um, so yeah, gets the better of Batman in that one exchange, um, and goes on to steal some canisters from whatever this place is. Um, Mr. Freeze is using his freeze gun, freezing the guards and the cops and everything from getting in their way. Batman shows up again and immediately yells, "Freeze!" To which he goes, "That's Mr. Freeze to you."
So good.
Yeah,
Which again shouldn't work, but works.
exactly.
It's great.
Yeah, it is awesome. Batman throws a batarang, it gets frozen. Um, there's a fight, and Freeze is trying to shoot Batman with his freeze ray. Managed to hit one of the goons in the legs, um, and then all the other guys are like Well, he shoots one of the other guys. He tries to shoot Batman. Batman uses his cape to kind of cover himself and takes it anyways. Batman's sitting there in a frozen egg, and Mr. Freeze is like, "Okay, time to go." And they're trying to grab their other guy, and Mr. Freeze is like, "Nah, leave him. He shouldn't have gotten in the way. That's his fault."
In the time that it took them to have that conversation, though, they could definitely have just chucked that guy in the
Yeah,
van.
they could have
True.
saved him.
Yeah.
Like,
But he
just
was
let's just take
weak.
goons aren't cheap, man.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta pay goon fees.
Plus,
Right.
you're
You
leaving him
know,
behind where Batman's gonna interrogate him. Like
he
it's
knows
Mhm.
everything.
yeah, he
Yeah.
knows your whole
Right?
stupid
Exactly.
plan.
Yep. So
He's under an
Batman.
NDA. It'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah. Don't worry. We're very litigious here at the Freeze Corporation. He'll
Mhm.
Yeah.
never talk.
So Batman busts out of the ice egg, and instead of running off to chase down Freeze anymore, he decides to help the henchman. Again, showing us Batman's character and uh, who he is in this particular series. Takes him to the Batcave to rehabilitate him. Puts him in the Bacta tank.
Yeah, that's what I thought to
Yep.
say. That I
Mhm.
was like, hey,
Um,
it's back to tank. All right.
you know, which apparently is just a hot chemical bath. Alfred comes in and is like, "Oh, you're being such good to this guy. He wouldn't have, done anything for you." And I love again Alfred with the jokes. Batman sneezes and he's like, "With all those compartments on your belt, you'd think there'd be one for tissues."
Man, all I can think about is fighting crime with a cold. Like, I don't even want to sit at my computer with a cold. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
sucks. Now Batman's got to go like do stuff with his head
Yeah.
pounding. Ugh.
Yep.
Not to mention in this day and age, that's just leaving DNA everywhere.
Yeah,
Everywhere.
True.
yeah. Everyone's
All
gonna
over
know
the
who you
place.
are.
I will say too, this was another moment where I'm like, you didn't have to do this. Like, you could have just had him sneeze occasionally. But
Mm-hmm.
if you listen to Kevin Conroy, there's a little, he stuffs himself up just a little bit in his voice, in
Yeah.
both voices that he does, to show off the having the cold. Which
Right.
for a kid show, you didn't have to do that, and people would have gotten it. Especially the Batman voice. Like, I could
Mm-hmm.
see
Yeah.
him playing it up as Bruce, but then you hear him do his Batman voice later, and he still sounds stuffed up. I was like, all right, that's
Mm-hmm.
going above and beyond.
And there's a difference when you're watching this pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. The behaviors
Yeah.
and the social crimes committed by Bruce
Mhm.
Wayne while
Yeah.
sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I half expected, other than the fact that we're only, we're not that far into the series, but I half expected that they were setting up for someone to be, because he shows up places as Batman and as Bruce Wayne, and he sees the same people, and he has a cold the whole time. And I thought we were setting something up, but we were not.
No.
We were not doing that.
Must be something going around. Batman and Bruce Wayne are
Yeah.
sick
I know, right? So
in the
speaking
summer.
of Bruce Wayne, we
That's
cut to
proof they were in the same room together.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best.
So as Bruce Wayne, and this is the other interesting thing this series did. They did a very good job of making Batman a detective through
Yeah.
and through,
Mhm.
and not just Batman, using his Bruce Wayne as a detective too. So he actually goes and meets with Ferris Boyle. As a couple of rich guys, they can just do that. And
That's what rich folk do.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
loved Ferris Boyle's introduction to Bruce Wayne. He's like, "Are you still the terror of the Gotham night scene?" Like that.
Like, well, yes, but
Sort
so
of, but not how
meaning.
you're thinking it.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, they play up the Bruce Wayne as a playboy character in this show for sure. But saying it just in that way, and it's just like the double meaning of terror of the night scene. Mm-hmm. Yes, he
Mhm.
is.
Mhm.
Amazing. So Boyle tells him he has no idea what's going on. There was an accident with this scientist named Dr. Freeze. There was an accident. It cost me a lot of money. Things happened, but he's dead. And as he's telling Bruce about this, he's also, talking about getting the Humanitarian Industrialist of the Year award. So he's, a really good guy, right? And Bruce is like, no, whatever. So we get Freeze's gang putting together the big ice cannon. And then we get Batman investigating more. Actually going back into the GothCorp offices, checking the classified files. I also liked how he broke in. He broke in as Bruce Wayne, in blonde as one of the security guards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
But with his
again,
bat suit underneath the
Yeah.
security
right?
guard
Of
Of
uniform.
course,
course. Yeah.
Um, goes in, going to look at those files. Oh, and before he left the Batcave, he's like, still sneezing and sniffing. He's like, "You'll need this." Alfred hands him a canister, and Batman's like, "What is this? Knockout gas?" He's like, "Chicken soup. The only way to fight a cold." So, but Batman's looking around, and he actually finds the files of the what happened to Doctor Freeze, and it's actually a videotape. Um, and he sees a video of Freeze working, who was actually working on cryogenics. It was a passion of his because his wife Nora, Freeze's wife Nora, had a degenerative illness, and he froze her with the intention of someday reviving her when the illness could be cured. Um, and again, this is the retcon on the Mr. Freeze character that just incredibly humanizes him and makes him one of the most sympathetic villains there is.
Yeah.
Because as he's recording, like the video is him recording his work, talking about what he's done and doing, and then Ferris Boyle, with some guards, breaks in and only complains about how much money he's lost on this project, and that's all he cares about. Um, and he wants it shut down. Freeze gets one of the guards' guns. Ferris kind of talks him down, and then immediately kicks him into the table of chemicals. And chemicals start going off. Boyle and the guards run out, and the last of the video we see is just Freeze, just crying in pain and sorrow about what's happening. Um, and we assume through this, they never really specifically say it, but we assume that his wife dies because of them shutting down this experiment. And like Boyle said earlier, he assumed Freeze died because of it. Um, and one of the intense lines in this movie is Batman's only reaction is saying, "My God,"
Yeah.
which made it through the initial run of the series. Did not later on when they had it on like Fox Kids and stuff. Like it was definitely censored then.
Really? Because
Yeah, it
that
was.
did
There was
shock me because my kid, I watched it with Sam, which was kind of fun because he held in there and enjoyed it. But I was like, dang, this got. It's just the way he says it and the delivery and the fact that it's he used the Lord's name in vain on children's programming.
Mm-hmm.
well, and that was a thing. That was one of their you can't do.
Sure.
And they somehow let that through, and it kept going. They did it more often throughout the initial run
Yeah.
of the series too.
Mm-hmm. So Mr. Freeze happened to be in the building and sneaks up on Batman. Um, Manages to get him and then knock him out, and then Batman's hanging in a somewhere. Mr. Freeze has his belt, and Batman's uh, first thing he says to Freeze is, "I saw your wife. I'm sorry." And then Freeze again with the cold puns, emotions frozen dead in me. Like there's no emotion left. It ends tonight. And Batman's just like, even if you have to kill everyone, and then we get, one of Freeze's most intense lines, never to feel warmth again. Oh yes, I'd kill for that. Another line that was censored later on, but was, made it through here, like the I'd kill for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Freeze leaves. Batman eventually breaks free. Um, and then Freeze and his goons run up to the place where Ferris Boyle's getting his award. I love that they pull up in the truck with the big ice gun on the back, and the valet is still like, "Keys, please."
Keys.
Yeah.
Um,
So
it's
good.
great. Kevin Conroy, I think, did the valet's voice too. Like a lot of the voice
Yeah.
actors would do little things like that. So it was funny. Um, but they use the freeze ray and start sealing the building. Um, Batman gets outside just in time. Apparently, that's where he was being held and all that.
Sure,
Um,
why not?
and starts to wreck the guys out the freeze gun. Um, just starts wrecking them, gets his belt back, and then does the amazingly iconic Batman back fist to the face to someone right behind him.
You got to have that.
Yeah, you
Batman's
do.
a ninja.
And then Mr. Freeze is like, nope, this is gonna happen, and pulls off one of the coolest moves of the entire episode. Kicks over the fire hydrant and puts his freeze gun on it, and basically
That's
freezes the
awesome.
water and rides it up
So
to
It's
cool.
very
the
good.
window.
It's very
I mean, it
Frozone.
makes
Yeah.
yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
makes absolutely no sense, but looks amazing.
Irrelevant.
I
Yeah.
bought it. Yeah.
No, this was cool factor all the way. Um, he gets into the room. He gets there um, to take out Boyle. Boyle's like, "Why?" He's like, "Don't you remember me?" Um, and then Batman shows up and they start fighting. Um, Reeves lets him know, "Oh yeah, by the way, my suit gives me 3 times strength. Just FYI."
Okay, all right. So there's a part where he's got Batman, and Batman's trying to give him like the karate chop.
Yeah.
Yep,
It's
to
just
the
not. It's just not doing anything. And I
Mm-hmm.
watched it 3 times. It made me laugh so hard. I was like, oh
Yeah.
no.
And again, one of the great lines Mr. Freeze utters: "All in my way must feel the icy touch of death." To which Batman answers with hitting him over the head with the thing of chicken soup.
Yeah, because
Um,
Mr. Freeze wasn't clever enough to use tempered glass for
Apparently.
Yeah.
his head bowl thing.
Mm-hmm. And and I love, even so, in the background, Summer Gleason is there, the reporter. She's like, "What is that stuff?" And Batman's just like, "The only way to fight a cold."
Yeah, right on.
which again shouldn't work and should make me groan and roll my
Oh,
eyes,
I
but
did. I did.
I accept it.
Pretty hard.
Yeah.
After everything Mr. Freeze said, this was
I was
easy.
like, all right.
Yeah, that one was okay, groan worthy. But then we get, Freeze there with his helmet busted, the cold coming out of his suit, and he's lost. He's reaching for Boyle. It's like vengeance, and Batman's just like, no, justice. And then he gives the tape of what happened to Freeze and his wife to Summer Gleason, tells him all about it, and then just leaves Ferris Boyle there shivering. Um,
By the way, it's Batman that goes for justice, which is interesting
right.
because if you think about, Batman being the symbol of vengeance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
He's having a good day. I mean, justice
yeah.
is where he wants to
Yeah.
be if he can, but
Mhm.
otherwise, vengeance
Yeah.
True.
is fine.
And then we get the final scene of the show with Freeze in prison. Apparently, he's got a cold room that they've given him, and he's holding the same little music mannequin thing of the ballerina as a symbol of his wife, and just talking about how much he failed her and failed to get the vengeance that she deserved, and asked her forgiveness. And then we see snow falling in the place, and then we catch Batman outside looking over him,
Brooding, as Batman does.
brooding, yeah,
Mm.
and then leaves him, and that's the end of the episode. And the one interesting thing is, Paul Dini talked about when he wrote this episode, he started with that ending in mind, and that ending is like the snowflakes falling are actually supposed to be Freeze's tears that
Mm.
cannot be wet. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
as he's crying, they're turning into the snowflakes. So those snowflakes are intended to be his tears in that room. And then he worked backwards from there, trying to get to there for this particular episode.
It
But
did a
that,
fantastic job rethinking Mr. Freeze into something
Mhm.
worthwhile. And I mean, it stuck because that's what everybody knows Mr. Freeze's origin story as.
Right.
I didn't know there was a
Mhm.
Mr. Freeze before this. It blew my
Yeah.
mind to find out that there was a Mr. Freeze in the 66
Mhm.
Batman.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, not only that, but they had killed off Mr. Freeze in the comics prior to the animated series coming out,
Mm-hmm.
and then brought him back and retconned his comic origin to what Paul Dini had written here
Yeah.
because of how good it was.
And
So
it based the Mr. Freeze and Batman and Robin off the same story.
Yes.
Was
Mhm.
just, but his wife being alive in in that iteration of it.
Yeah.
He was alive, but in the cold coffin thing. The
She-
frozen.
They kind of retcon that later on, and
Oh, okay.
we get stories with him dealing with her, and specifically the movie Sub-Zero is a big thing, dealing with her and all that kind of stuff. In the comics, they did the comic book thing, and she got out and was a bunch of different crazy characters and got
Yeah.
weird. So
Everyone in the proximity of any villain eventually becomes something.
right,
Either a hero,
Mhm.
a villain, some sort of foil, falls in a vat of
Mhm.
chemicals and gets electric powers. Who knows? They make
right,
up
Sure.
stuff all the time.
yeah. So, um, Travis, I don't need to ask you what you thought, but go ahead and gush as much as you want.
Um, uh, Everything else is on hold for the rest of the week as I just dive into more Batman the Animated Series because it's so good, and there's a reason that this one is looked at so fondly because it's such a simple little plot, but they gave us a character that has a compelling backstory and makes him into a sympathetic villain. He's still a
Hmm.
villain. He's a bad guy.
Right.
He's doing terrible things, and he doesn't care who he hurts in order to get what he
Hmm.
wants. But there's a sympathetic angle to him, and Batman sees that
Yeah.
moment right at the end where he's checking in on him at Arkham,
Right.
and he kind of just gives one quick look back. Like, you can tell he feels for him when he sees the videotape. He feels for
Hmm.
Victor Freeze. And yeah, the show just knocked it out of the park. It was so good, and it birthed the entirety of the DC animated universe. All came out of this show. They ended up
Yeah.
doing
Hmm.
a Superman series. They did a second
Yep.
run of Batman where they redesigned a couple of things.
They basically,
Um,
when they did Superman, they did the Superman series and then redesigned Batman to fit that same artistic style so that
yeah,
they could meld them together. One of the
yep,
greatest um, little kind of TV movies was the couple episode run of Batman and Superman meeting.
yep.
World's
That
Finest
was real
is
good.
amazing.
Batman Beyond came out of this, and
Yep.
then Justice League and everything else
Hmm.
that happened,
And
all
if you don't
born out
know,
of this show.
and again, one other tie, if you don't know it, Static Shock is tied to this entire universe. If you never watched
That's
that
true.
show,
Yep.
Dwayne McDuffie did that, and it's all tied together. Like you get some Static Shock in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited later on. Um, but yeah, Amy, what did you think?
I thought it was good. I mean, it's Batman. Is kind of where I
Hmm.
land on that. You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
Sure.
it's well done, but it's not necessarily for me, and
Hmm.
that's fine. But I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
it's beautifully animated, absolutely
yeah,
gorgeous.
Oh,
Um,
and that was something I was mentioning earlier. Is like that opening sequence is so beautiful, but the animation throughout
mm,
is so good
yeah,
all
hmm,
the time.
that
And
sure.
opening
that
sequence is great, though.
Hmm.
there are a few episodes though that I think Amy you would actually really enjoy.
I'm sure.
That
Oh
I
yeah.
could tell you about. That like there's one in particular called Almost Gotham
Uh huh.
Hmm.
that is
Uh huh.
all based around it. It's a bunch of the villains. It's I think it's the Penguin, the Joker, Killer Croc, and like one other, and they're playing poker,
Uh huh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
and they're trading stories of when they almost got Batman.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Um,
Hmm.
and
I
it's
love a
just
good
it's great
old.
because it's all yeah
Yeah.
they're all these short little stories, but it's a fun way to kind of flip the formula of the show on its head and tell it from their perspective.
Sure.
So
Hmm. Yeah. Steven, what about you?
I love it. This isn't my first time watching The Heart of Ice because years ago when Kevin Smith was doing Fat Man on Batman, uh,
Mm,
and he was
yeah.
sticking to Batman stuff there during the first bunch of podcast episodes. This was one that they talked about a lot because of how heavy it was and how it kind of revolutionized what could be done and what
Hmm.
stories you could tell and everything. So I loved it, and some of the things that I to point out about the show. I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but the fact that it's animated on black backgrounds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Timm's
Hmm.
decision. I think it was Bruce Tim who decided, like, hey, this is the style
Yeah.
we're going to go with. Everybody's going to animate on top of black backgrounds. Blows my
Hmm.
mind still because it's
Yeah.
such a weird choice. That makes it just adds some tone to it that you didn't otherwise have. And I forgot how good this animation really was because I'm watching the intro and it's so smooth. It's very reminiscent of the Max Fleischer Superman cartoons, just
Yeah.
that
yeah,
liquid animation. You're
Hmm.
like, how many frames per second is this running at? Because it is incredibly fluid, which is great for Batman fighting, like any
Yeah.
fist fights and
Oh,
Mm.
leg
big time.
sweeps and stuff. And
Hmm.
it's really gorgeous. I'm a big fan. Like I said, I only watched less than 10 episodes probably as a kid, but I could go back now and watch a bunch of them. And Sam enjoyed this one with me, and like Clayface was one of his favorite characters ever as a
Ooh,
kid.
yeah.
Like as a kid, he's 9. When he was younger, and we were really watching a lot of superhero stuff, like he loved Clayface. So I think I could
And
stroll down this memory lane with him a little bit.
oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
the Clayface in the animated series is great, and he's
It's
voiced by
great.
Ron
Yeah.
Perlman. We didn't
Yeah.
mention Ron
I
Perlman
love
does
Ron
his voice.
Perlman.
Hmm.
That's
So
awesome. Yeah, we read like a
yeah,
bunch of the like when I would read to Sam when he was 4 or 5, we had a lot of those beginner learning to read
Hmm.
books, and their Batman books, and they were based off of the style of Batman the animated series. So
Yeah.
all the characters look like these characters. It's super fun. Also, this really for me cemented Batman's Rogues Gallery as being easily my favorite of all the heroes.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
Spider-Man's
Yeah.
rogues are amazing. Batman's rogues are like just an inch above, and a lot of it's because of the
Hmm.
psychological terror they
Yeah.
put out
Hmm.
on the
mhm.
Hmm.
Oh
screen.
yeah.
They're all little weird facets of Batman's old messed up life. I
Yeah.
love it.
Uh-huh.
And this series also, one of the other things that made Batman the animated series so good was that it didn't talk down to its audience.
Hmm.
Like
Right.
you mentioned
Mm.
earlier, it was kind of aimed at that 11, 12, 13-year-old sort of audience, and it gave them something that would push you just a little bit, and it was something even as crazy as like having cops or characters, goons, whatever, on the screen shooting guns at the time. Like
Yeah.
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 if you think about GI Joe, none of them had weapons that fired bullets. They were all
Right.
laser guns, and everything was
Hmm.
over the top, and these were bullet firing guns
Hmm.
in this show, and like it just felt real. And for me at that age, it was something so cool to see because I'd seen Batman on the big screen, and now I'm seeing an animated version that basically falls right in line with that. And and to do that in an animated series that ran on afternoon television was great.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. And again, this team did so much of everything we talked about. One more I want to bring up. If you have, if you are inclined to, I would highly recommend watching Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. One of
mm.
the most incredible Batman stories ever done. Um,
Well, so that was a feature length episode of Batman Beyond, but there were two movies um, based on Batman the animated series. There
right.
was Batman Mask of the Phantasm and
Yeah.
Batman
Yes.
and Mr. Freeze Sub Zero.
Hmm.
Uh, and both of them are incredibly good.
Yes.
Mm.
Very much
Mask of the
so.
Phantasm is fantastic.
Mask of the
Yeah.
Phantasm came out in theaters. I
It did.
It
remember
did.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was probably 8 or 9 at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
It was.
really good, and
Hmm.
it unfortunately bombed, but
Yeah.
it wasn't marketed very well at all.
No,
No.
no,
Like
it was.
Mistakes were made,
Yeah, I
but not
remember
on
seeing
the
it,
actual
but
content.
I was just not of the age. Again, it was one of those things like I don't really like Batman. There's not enough stuff that I like as a cartoon loving kid. It's hit this weird in between time, and I think it just
Mm.
was hard
Hmm.
for
yeah,
it to land its audience really well. They didn't know who to sell it to.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was Batman the animated series. Have we? Did anybody get any feedback on this one at all?
I checked the mailbag. I didn't get anything. I asked a crew of folks today, and they all went, "Oh yes, Batman. I remember that." That was about the
Hmm.
most I could get out of them.
Yeah, that's about
I
all I
did
got
not.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like
Okay.
we can sit here and just gush about it, and everybody we ask is like, "Yeah, I remember watching Batman some."
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said last week, I had to pick this one. I'm a comic book nerd. I got my degree in that. I had to pick this one. So yeah, I'll sit
Yeah.
here and gush all night about it. But
Look,
yeah,
if you hadn't, I was going to.
I
So
know somebody was going to. So, but I went ahead and took it this time. Um, but if you do have feedback, definitely, uh, you know, let us know. Hit us up on the Twitters, Those Days Show. Hit us up at the email, those were the days show at gmail.com. Hit us up on the Two Dorks Discord. Um,
twodorks.net/discord.
there you go. Thank you, Steven.
Yeah.
And let us know what you thought of Batman the Animated Series, or what you think about what we might be watching next time, which I believe Steven has that for us.
Oh, I am so excited. I've been worried about this for a week. What are we going to watch? What are we going to watch? And then I found out we're not just watching Fox cartoons, we're just watching Fox Kids Afternoon,
Right.
which opened up a lot of possibilities. And one of those possibilities means that we're going to the center of weirdness of the from the entire world. We are venturing into Erie, Indiana.
Ooh,
And we're gonna be. It's
nice.
so good. We're gonna be watching. This was very difficult for me to choose an episode because I watched several tonight with Sam, and we were just glued to the TV, and I was having the time of my life. And I was like, okay, are we gonna watch one of the ones I just watched? Are we gonna watch something new? I've picked one because of a guest star that's in it, and because of the first appearance of one of my favorite characters on the show. We're gonna be watching season 1, episode 13, "The Hole in the Head Gang." I am really flipping excited about this show.
Nice.
Also,
many
this just
things.
in, we did get a little bit of feedback on Twitter.
Oh, okay.
I did miss that, but Skizix writes in and says Batman, Spider-Man, and X-Men cartoons were an after-school staple in the '90s. And for the record, or for this episode, I always love a good villain origin story, and Alfred is correct. The cure for a cold is indeed hot chicken soup, but only the chicken soup made by my grandma.
Sure.
Oh, there you go.
That's perfect. Oh, I forgot to mention, Erie, Indiana is streaming commercial free if you have that version of Peacock, and it's also on
Okay.
Freevee if you just want to watch it with ads and you don't want to pay for more streaming. So you
Sweet.
can catch it in those two places. It's gonna be wonderful. Yeah, the Tupperware episode. We watched that Darkness Files. It's so wonderful. Foreverware.
Yeah.
Excellent. Erie, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's going to be fun. So, until next week, for Steven, for Amy, for Travis, I'm Audie. Go watch some more Fox Kids TV. Watch some Erie, Indiana, if I can say that right. And we'll see you next week on Those Were the Days.
I screwed up the audio, so this is what we're gonna go.